it like this. Does that work? Yeah? Okay. My name is Sean Taylor, and I am a sociology psychology professor here at DMACC Boone. And it's my great privilege to introduce our guest speaker today. The speaker is brought to us today as part of the DMACC War and the Human Experience series out of DMACC Ankeny. September 11th, as you all know, is the day where the world stood still. Buried, crushed, and bleeding beneath the tons of rubble of the South Tower, FDNY Lieutenant Joe Torrillo wondered what life would be if given just one more day. He was miraculously found alive by rescue workers with multiple fractures, a massive brain injury, and barely breathing. The light of day was something he always took for granted. Within 10 minutes of being rescued, Joe was buried again under the debris of the second collapse of the North Tower. Now retired, he'll be sharing his powerful story, buried alive twice on 9/11. Please hold your applause and direct your attention to the screen.
The day of September 11, 2001 was one of the most beautiful and pristine days that most New Yorkers had ever recalled. It appeared as if Michelangelo himself had chosen the perfect shade of blue from his palette to paint the sky.
103.5 KCU, the beat of New York.
The changing of sunlight.
The birds were chirping in unison as if they were welcoming the warm and bright morning sunshine and bidding farewell to the ending of summer. Then the unimaginable happened.
It appears that there is more and more fire and smoke enveloping the very top of the building.
America was attacked by Islamic extremists in 4 attacks of terrorism in New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. As people from around the world were glued to their television sets,
Perhaps you have no idea what into, oh my goodness, oh God, there's another one.
Another plane has just
Oh my goodness, there's another one.
right into the middle of it. Right, God, it's right in the middle of the building.
rescuers were racing to the scenes in a desperate effort to save lives. By nightfall on that fateful day, 2,573 innocent Americans would lose their lives in the horrific carnage, and another 403 emergency service workers would sacrifice theirs in what is considered the greatest rescue effort ever undertaken. For the few actual survivors, they all have a compelling story to tell. Tales of irony, both happy and sad, still surround the images and sounds of horror witnessed in every corner of the earth in the days after the attacks. While every story seems to have a legitimate place in history, few can compare to the story of Lieutenant Joe Torrillo, a career firefighter with the New York City Fire Department. Joe's story, one that he has been asked to share around the globe, has been considered the most ironic and interesting story of all. Joe survived the collapse of not just one tower, but both. Buried 2 times in 1 hour under the debris of each tower with massive bodily injury, miraculously he was found and rescued twice. Listen to Joe as he reveals his amazing and heart-wrenching story of survival.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that great invitation. I appreciate it. Before I begin Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Matt Walsh and the administration of DMACC for giving me these opportunities to come here and meet you and to tell you a story about my survival. 344 firefighters were declared dead. And a couple of days later, 3 days later, one was found alive, and that was me. And I'm going to share my story with you today. The theme of the topic is war and the human experience. So 2 weeks ago today, we commemorate the 22nd anniversary of the worst event in recent memory on American soil when the United States was attacked 4 times in 3 different locations. Twice in New York City. 2 towers were struck within 17 minutes of each other by commercial jets. United Airlines Flight 93 on its way to San Francisco was overtaken by the flight crews and also by the passengers when they dragged the terrorists out of the cockpit, and they laid that plane down in a lonely field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. That jet, we theorized, was intending to strike the Capitol, Washington, D.C., and then at the same time, American Airlines Flight number 77 struck the Pentagon. So we endured 4 attacks at 3 different locations. And many stories have been told, ladies and gentlemen. They've been chronicled in movies and magazines, newspaper articles and documentaries. There's so many stories, I can go on and on. A lot of stories are happy ones, believe it or not. Stories about people who should have been there that day, or weren't for whatever circumstances that may have been. Then there's stories about people who should not have been there, but were there. Sad stories, people that lost their lives. My story, from what everybody tells me, could be the most interesting and ironic story anybody's ever heard that surrounds that day, and I'm going to share my story. Because when people hear my story, they want to hear it 100 more times, because it's that ironic. For people that haven't heard it and find out about it, they're disappointed I didn't share the story. So without any further ado, I want to share my story. But today, ladies and gentlemen, and to the students, I didn't come here to make this the Joe Torrillo sob story. I didn't come here to promote myself. The truth of the matter is the messages that I want to share today are mostly to the students and adults as well. Take away from this whatever you care to, and at the end, when I'm done, I'm going to open up the floor to some questions. Hopefully I'll have some answers, and if anybody wants to share a story with me, I welcome that as well. So anybody who's 28 years of age or older will probably remember where they were on that fateful day. Like I was 8 years old on the very day that President Kennedy was assassinated, so that day is forever etched in my mind. Back in the 1970s, New York City was giving exams for civil service departments. There's a lot of civil service departments in New York City, but the most popular ones were firefighter, police officer, and sanitation worker. I came from a family of civil service workers. My father was one of 9 children. They grew up and actually were raised during the Depression of the 1930s. And so they were always very adamant about me and my brothers and all my cousins trying to get a civil service job because it was security and it had benefits and a pension. And looking back, it was the best thing they ever steered me into. I didn't come from a family of professionals. There were no lawyers, accountants, or doctors in my family. We were all blue-collar workers. So knowing that I would probably go into some kind of civil service agency, I wanted to pick one of the 3 top agencies, which was firefighting, police, and sanitation, simply because they paid the most. I wanted to be a police officer because my uncle and my cousin were both cops back home in New York City, and all my friends wanted to be firefighters. They had an extra application, and they said to me, Joe, why don't you take the firefighter exam with us? Afterwards, we'll go out for a couple of beers. I said, give me the application. It was the beers I wanted to go out for. In any event, I filled out the application, and on December 3rd, 1977, they gave that test. 70,000 young kids took that test. And I took the exam only because my friends wanted me to, and I wanted to compete against them. And the test was so difficult, 6 men died taking the physical. Why? Because it was the first time that women were allowed to take the test. I think they made the test extra hard because they ended up in a court case when they all failed. And they had a legitimate argument saying that the city of New York made that physical so hard so that they wouldn't pass it. They claimed in front of the judge that the fire department just didn't want women on the fire department. And they did win the lawsuit, and the women for that time were the first ones to be given an opportunity to become firefighters. And so 70,000 took the test, only 3,000 passed. I was in the top 1,000, and all my friends failed the test, and I took the fire department job just to get them angry. I was going to get sworn in, and I was going to resign the next day. Forever and ever, when we were older, like today, looking back, I was going to say I was a firefighter and none of you were. But anyway, I went into the fire department, I got sworn in, and I figured, let me stick it out to see if this job is really for me. And on my first assignment on April 6, 1981, of all 357 firehouses in New York City, they could arbitrarily place me to begin my career after finishing the training academy. New York City chose this little firehouse across the street from the South Tower. It was a brand new firehouse that had just opened, and I was a brand new firefighter. Engine Company 10. It's still standing. And I spent 15 years there protecting the towers, and after 15 years as a fireman there, with no pun intended, I was ready to start climbing the promotional ladder. And in 1996, on September 5th, I was promoted to lieutenant. And when you get promoted to lieutenant, they take you out of your firehouse, and they place you in another part of New York City. There's 357 firehouses. They don't want you supervising your friends. The fire department thinks when they make you a lieutenant, they're going to turn you into what's called a manager. They think it works, but I don't care what firehouse you work in. It's a different circus with the same clowns, so it really doesn't make a difference. And shortly after getting promoted to lieutenant, a couple of months later, on New Year's Eve of 1996, going into 1997, I was working in Brooklyn, New York, where I was born and raised, in a very busy firehouse, and an alarm came in for the scene that you see on the screen here. And we were the third fire engine scheduled to get to that location, but we were there first, because the other two fire engines were out at emergency medical calls. And when we pulled up to the building, there were people outside screaming, there's a woman trapped on the second floor in the rear of that house that you see that's on fire. Well, firefighters are kind of like a football team. It's almost like we have separate entities, and almost like a defense and an offense. Some firefighters' jobs are to get up to the roof on big ladders and cut holes in the roof to let the fire, the heat, the smoke, and the gases out. That makes it easier for the other firefighters on the interior team that are taking the hoses in to extinguish the fire and search for the people. It makes it easier. And in New York City, a lot of our roofs on a lot of our homes are flat roofs. They're not pitched. They're flat roofs with heavy amounts of tar. And firefighters have to work very, very hard and diligently to cut through the tar to get through to the underlying wood to be able to vent out that fire, heat, smoke, and gases. It's not so easily to do that. I've done it so many times. But before you actually have to do that, some firefighters will go over to a skylight, which typically is situated right above the interior staircase. Its whole purpose is to let natural light into the interior of the building onto the staircase that leads to the second floor. They'll smash out that skylight because it's a lot easier than cutting that roof open, so you get what we call an immediate vent. It makes it that much easier for the firefighters like me that are going on the inside of the building with our hoses. And of course, they smashed out the glass skylight. The whole skylight came down and went right through my left thumb. And after the fire was out, they rushed me to the hospital and they had to kind of stitch my thumb back onto my hand. And for at least 1 year, I was temporarily disabled. I was restricted from firefighting for a year. And the fire department said, you're not going to sit at home and recuperate. You have to come to headquarters and take a desk job. So I said, okay. I mean, I'm a team player. I get my salary. I have to do what I have to do. But I never worked in an office in my life, and I had no idea what they were going to make me do. When I showed up, I had to take a desk job, and they wanted me to work in the Office of Fire Safety Education. I didn't know we had an Office of Fire Safety Education. I didn't know who they were or what they did. But in essence, it was a whole group of firefighters that were recuperating from various injuries and illnesses. Because we couldn't be active and fight fires, they would send us out Monday to Friday to one of the 3,000 schools in New York City and go into the classroom and talk to the kids about both preventing and surviving a fire. When I showed up and they explained this to me, I said, look, I don't think I belong here because I'm not a teacher by trade. I'm actually a carpenter, plumber, electrician by trade. I don't have any college credits in education. I'm not a public speaker. So the captain who was running the program, he said, Joe, don't worry about it. He says, everybody that's here doesn't have any experience doing this. It's not a big deal. You go out to the school, the kids are just excited for you to be there. And so for the first 4 months, I was kind of hanging around the office, learning how to use a computer, helping my boss do payroll, scheduling, answering telephones. And 4 months later into this new assignment, I came to work one morning and the captain said to me, Joey, I need a favor. I said, okay, his name was Tommy Torpia, who happened to be a friend of mine. We were firemen so many years before. He was a new captain, I was a new lieutenant. He was in charge of this Office of Fire Safety Education. I said, Tommy, how can I help you? He said, Billy just called in sick this morning. I need somebody to cover his classroom. Now, I knew eventually this was going to happen. I had a lot of anxiety. I knew at some point he's going to want me to go into the classroom. And I was hesitant because I never had experience speaking in front of people. Like I said, I'm not a teacher by trade. So anyway, I said, Tommy, listen, no problem, I'll go, but what do I do when I get there? He said, take your firefighting clothing, take your air tank, take a toy telephone, teach them how to dial 911, take some crayons and a coloring book, take a smoke detector, teach the kids about the sound of a smoke detector, stay low and go. He told me all these little things that I should be telling the students. But I got to the school, I thought I would speak for about 15 minutes. I actually spoke for 45 minutes. The teacher was in the back of the room marking test papers. She says, okay, Lieutenant Torrillo, you can go now. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe I got up in front of these kids and spoke for 45 minutes. I went back to the office and Tommy asked me, Joey, how'd you make out? I said, Tommy, you know what? It was actually a lot of fun. I says, it was a great experience. He says, okay, that's good because now I'm going to send you out on a regular basis. And I was going out on a regular basis just from that one opportunity. And I got so good at doing this, they got rid of Tommy and named me the director of the whole program. And still till today, he thinks I orchestrated that. He thought that I wanted his job. I didn't want his job. They got rid of him and I became the director of the program. And as the director of the program, I look back 50 years before I was in that office and I tried to figure out what did they ever do here. And the answer was very simple, nothing. Because nobody wanted to do this. The personnel was very nilly-willy. As soon as people came in to this office, a couple of weeks later, they were already back in the firehouse, and the same thing with the management. But as the director of the fire department's education program, the new director, I decided I was going to make a 2-year commitment and to see if I can build this into a very, very viable and a program that would have some kind of success in lowering fires and fatalities in New York City. And I started thinking about the educational process as a whole, although I'm not a teacher by trade. And I realized that kids, even adults, like having fun when they learn. So I thought we should have a learning center where kids can go on a school trip and learn about the messages of fire prevention and fire survival in a very Disney quality, in a Broadway type of show. And I sold the idea to Mayor Giuliani. Mayor Giuliani loved the idea. Mayor Giuliani liked anything that made him look good. That's the kind of a guy he was. But he's a very accomplished man at the same time. And you know what? He gave me a $3 million budget. And ladies and gentlemen, to the students, there's an old saying that goes like this: be careful what you wish for, because you might get what you want. I sold this great grandiose idea to the mayor, but I had no idea what I was doing. And on top of it, what made it even more difficult was the owner of Rockefeller Center, a man by the name of Jerry Spire. He gave me the property in Rockefeller Center in the heart of Manhattan next to Radio City Music Hall. He says, Joe, he says, I hear that you want to build a learning center. I want you to build it right here in Rockefeller Center. I says, Jerry, that's really great. I says, but we don't have that kind of budget. We couldn't afford to do it there. He says, yes, you can. He says, I'm going to give you the property for 10 years for $1. Now the pressure is really on. Now I really have to deliver, but I don't know what I'm doing because there's no other learning center like this in the world. So at the sake of not wanting to embarrass myself and the mayor, and not wanting to walk around with egg on my face. I took the 5 most common causes of fire, and I brought them to life in a Disney quality Broadway type of show in a venue called the Fire Zone, right next to Radio City Music Hall, right around the corner from where they put up the big Christmas tree every year. And I worked on that project, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for 2 straight years, 7 days a week. I wasn't even getting paid for the amount of time I put into this project. But it's something I believed in, it's something I wanted to see come to fruition at a very, very dear cost to myself, but looking back, every second working on that project was well worth it. And boys and girls, and to all the students, everything in life is not about money. Money comes sometimes at the end of your success. Don't go through life just thinking about how much money is waiting in store for you, because I certainly never did that. And so in this new learning center, kids can come and they can see all the tools and equipment. We had child-sized firefighting gear. They can put on the firefighting clothing. They can see all our tools and equipment. They can get on the fire engine. They can talk to the dispatcher. They can blow the horn, put the sirens on. It was an amazing project. We opened in October 2000. And a month later, we got nominated for what's called the Theo Award at the Emmys for venues of themed entertainment. And I won that very prestigious award. Never thought in a million years that, first of all, I didn't know this award existed. And I could never imagine that all my hard work would culminate into winning this Emmy equivalent award called the Theo Award. Grew up against Disney World, Six Flags, and all these science centers, and I won that award. And of course, you know, Mayor Giuliani was tickled pink because he took a lot of credit for this, and I won the Administrative Excellence Award. And then a couple of months later, after we were open, I'm spending all my time promoting the Learning Center. It's now a new year, January 2001. I'm sitting in my office in headquarters on January 4th, having a cup of coffee right after 9 o'clock in the morning when I got to work. And the phone rings. Ring, ring. Fire Department headquarters, this is Lieutenant Torrillo. Hey, good morning, this is the Fisher-Price Corporation. I said, this is Fire Department headquarters, you got the wrong number. No, we don't have the wrong number, we want to speak to Lieutenant Torrillo. Okay, that's me, how can I help you? He said, we want to run something by you might be interested in. Okay, you have some time to speak? 9 o'clock, and I work till 6 o'clock. Can you speak for 9 hours? Shoot, go ahead, give it to me, what do you got? He says, are you familiar with the Fisher-Price Corporation? I said, I think it's a household name in this country. They said, no, more specifically, do you know anything about our little action figures we call rescue heroes that kids love? No, truthfully, I don't know anything about it. Well, let's explain it to you. We have a whole line of little action figures we call rescue heroes that kids love. We have a police officer called Jake Justice. We have his partner, Bill Barker, a K-9 police officer. We have their boss, Sergeant Siren, his supervisor, Captain Cuffs, an ambulance attendant by name of Perry Medic. We have a lifeguard called Sandy Beach. We also have a construction worker called Jack Hammer. We have a mountain rescue specialist by name of Cliff Hanger, and his partner, Rocky Canyon. And we have a medevac rescue pilot by name of Hal E. Copter. And we have a scuba diver called Gil Gripper. We have an astronaut called Roger Houston. We have a ski patroller by name of Al Pine. And we have a female firefighter called Wendy Waters. They said, but now we want our new rescue hero to be a likeness of a New York City firefighter. We're going to call him Billy Blazes. So in January 2001, I set up a meeting with the Fisher-Price executives and the artists. And as I was speaking about what a firefighter looks like with his firefighting clothing, his tools and equipment, his air tank, the artists and illustrators had art pads on easels with crayons and markers. As I was speaking, they're drawing. And they took the drawing and they used that artwork to create the prototype, which took 6 months from January to July of 2001. 6-month process to take that artwork and make the first mold and prototype for this new rescue hero, a New York City firefighter called Billy Blazes. I set up a meeting with the Fisher-Price executives to review the prototype in July of 2001. And at the meeting, we requested some changes. And the Fisher-Price executives want to know what defines a New York City fireman. I said, well, we're unshaven, we have big mustaches, and we smoke cigars. So they said, we're not going to put a cigar in Billy Blaze's hand. They took out a black Sharpie, and they drew a big mustache on Billy Blaze's. Everyone thought he needs to look more like me. And they remolded Billy Blaze's with the big mustache, and he was made to look just like me. It took 3 weeks to do the remolding. It was now July 28, 2001. And the Fisher-Price executives want to know, when can we introduce Billy Blaze's to the world? They wanted a date. I thought October would be a great time because it's Fire Prevention Month. October is the longest running health initiative in the world. It goes back to 1871. After they rebuilt Chicago, supposedly after Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern in a barn and burned half of Chicago down back in October of 1871. And they thought that was very, very apropos to this project. We're too close to Christmas and the holiday season. They want to get Billy Blaze on the market a little bit sooner. So this meeting was July 28, 2001. October was too far away, and I couldn't think of another date in between that would be appropriate for this project. And I was kind of brainstorming, and I chose the day of September 11, 2001 to introduce the new rescue hero, Billy Blazes, to the world, because 911 is an emergency phone number in New York City. For the first time, we were having a 911 themed safety day. We were going to talk about how to prevent fires, how to survive fires, and at the same time, we're going to introduce a new rescue hero called Billy Blazes, a likeness of a New York City firefighter made to look like me to the world on September 11, 2001. I remember that day like yesterday. The sky was the perfect shade of blue. Birds were welcoming the beautiful morning sunshine and bidding farewell to the ending of summer. And this little Greek Orthodox church called St. Nicholas across the street from the South Tower, the bells were tolling. It was the first day of school in New York City. We were voting for the new mayor. I got to work early that morning at 6 o'clock. I had a lot of work to catch up on before I headed out to the press conference for Billy Blazes. And as I'm sitting in my office, it was about maybe 8:30 in the morning, 20 minutes to 9. I heard people out in the hallway in headquarters, something about a report of a plane hitting the Twin Towers. I went inside my boss's office, and this is the image I could see on his TV. And I said to my boss, I said, is this a hoax? Is this some kind of fake news? Is this a movie? What is this? He says, no, Joe, this really happened. So at this point, I realized every emergency vehicle was going to be rushing to the scene. And if I didn't get out of headquarters and get to that press conference, I was going to get stuck in all this traffic and all these TV stations, all the newspaper reporters, the mayor, everybody was waiting for me in Rockefeller Center to introduce that new rescue hero at 9 o'clock, Billy Blazes, the New York City firefighter. And at 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight number 11 strikes the North Tower. We didn't know if it was a small plane or a jet. We were uncertain if it was a small plane, not sure if it was a big commercial jet. But all I knew is I needed to get out of headquarters immediately and start heading my way into Manhattan to beat all those emergency vehicles. I wasn't even really thinking too much about the World Trade Center because I really wasn't sure what had happened. Nobody did. So I got into my fire department car as I zoomed out of headquarters, and 2 blocks away is the very famous Brooklyn Bridge that connects Brooklyn into Manhattan. And I'm zooming over the Brooklyn Bridge, and I get to the other side. It took all about 20 seconds. When I get to the Manhattan side of the Brooklyn Bridge, I'm looking to the left about an eighth of a mile away, and this is what I could see. I see about 10 floors completely engulfed in black smoke and flames from the 93rd to the 99th floor of the North Tower, which was number 1 World Trade Center. Now I'm thinking it has to be a jet, but it really doesn't make sense because jets don't fly in that direction. They fly in the opposite direction on the approach to LaGuardia Airport. But now I'm thinking about my friends in my original firehouse across the street from the World Trade Center where I started my career, although I left there in 1996 when I got promoted to lieutenant. And I have to make a quick decision. What do I do? Do I go to my original firehouse, because this is a catastrophe, and I'm thinking about Billy Blazes, I'm thinking about all the media, the TV stations, newspaper reporters are all waiting for me, and I got to make an impromptu decision. I says, the heck with Billy Blazes, the heck with the press conference, the heck with the Fisher-Price executive, and I headed to my firehouse. I was there exactly 9 o'clock in the morning. And I parked my car in the rear of the firehouse on the sidewalk, because I remember in 1993, I was there for the bombing of the Twin Towers. And we had a big problem back then. All emergency vehicles were haphazardly parked and we couldn't get ambulances to hospitals. So the lesson we learned on February 26, 1993 from the bombing was don't block streets if there's ever another incident. And that's why I parked my car in the back of the firehouse. And I ran to the front of the firehouse. I ran inside and I needed firefighting clothing. I was in my dress uniform. I took off my dress uniform and I went over to the coat rack. We all leave our equipment in the firehouse when we were off duty. And I grabbed Lieutenant Tommy McNamara's firefighting clothing, his helmet, his jacket, his boots, his gloves, his pants. He was off duty. And I happened to know Lieutenant McNamara, so I knew he wouldn't be angry when he found out I was wearing his firefighting clothing. And at that point, I ran out of the firehouse, which was right across the street from the South Tower, and I was heading to the North Tower, which was the first building struck. At that point, as I'm running United Airlines flight number 175, I hear a noise, I look up, and it's approaching the South Tower. At exactly 9:03 a.m., 3 minutes after I got to the scene. And I'm right underneath that jet. It strikes the South Tower, and the jet just disappears, and this huge fireball comes down right at me. And I turned, I made it back into the firehouse before that fireball exploded onto the street. Had I not made it back into the firehouse 40 feet away, I would have been killed right there. And New Yorkers on the way to work are looking up in disbelief. To me now, it's obvious a terrorist attack. 2 towers struck by 2 jets within 17 minutes. This is no coincidence, especially because I was there for the bombing in 1993. And I realized those trapped above have no way of getting down below the fire. And we have no way of getting to them. And my next assessment, the buildings are going to collapse and nobody will listen or believe me. And people are hanging out the building, waving an article of clothing, so many floors up above. And I'm imagining that I can hear them saying to me, please hurry up, we can't take it here no more. Of course I didn't hear their voices, but I'm imagining what they're all saying to themselves and what they would want to say to me if their voices could reach me 93 floors below the point of where they're trapped. And at that point, I saw something fall. I thought it was a piece of the building, and I turned to run, but then something told me to turn back, and I saw arms and legs flailing through the air. And at that point, people were coming down hugging each other, and they would just hit the roof of the surrounding buildings around the street, and there would be nothing left of them. And so people ask me all these years later, Joe, why didn't you say the buildings were going to collapse? Well, I went to college for engineering and architecture. This is a picture of me in my freshman year of college. You might say I was a Michael Jackson wannabe. But that's what I went to school for. And I got a degree in architecture and engineering because my real passion in life was the construction industry. That's what I really wanted to do, except I did so well on the firefighter's exam, I decided to make a career out of it. But I went to school for architecture and engineering, and 2 of my professors in college were working for the concrete contractor on the Twin Towers. So they used to take us, the engineering students, down to the towers when they were going up to study them. And I always had those memories of being there as an engineering student. Then I become a firefighter and get placed in the firehouse across the street from the towers. I was back as a firefighter protecting them and no longer an engineering student studying them. But I always remember those days there as an engineering student, so I understood the construction of the towers in ways that I never spoke about, in ways that nobody could really understand. And of course, I would always say to myself over the 15 years I was in that firehouse, why did I go to engineering school? What a waste of time. I never did anything with that degree. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you know what the moral of the story is? I thought I wasted all my time, but education's never wasted. Once you get an education, you can't lose it, it can't be stolen, you can't lend it, it can't be borrowed. You never ever know in this life when all your education is going to come back and benefit you. And all that education came back to me on the day of September 11, 2001, that gave me the ability to make that important assessment that those towers were doomed to collapse, but nobody would listen to me or believe me. And I used to say to myself, why did I always stay up late at night reading these hideous textbooks, crunching calculations and doing blueprints? I thought I wasted my time, the boys and girls, I never did waste my time. It all came back on September 11, 2001. But I, knowing that the towers are going to collapse, who I wanted to save most were the EMTs and the paramedics that were setting up their triage, which is a treatment area in the lobby of both towers. And I told them they had to get out. And more ambulances were rushing to the scene, and the ambulance crews were hesitant. They were resisting me. They didn't want to get out of the lobbies of the towers because they were setting up a treatment area. They couldn't understand why I was forcing them to leave. They didn't understand and believe that the towers were doomed to collapse. And this last ambulance crew was giving me a hard time. But I finally got them to leave, and I told them, get in the ambulances, go about 6 blocks away, and stage your ambulances side by side. We'll call you one crew at a time as we need you, but you got to get out of here now before the towers collapse. And they didn't want to leave, but I got them to leave. And I was outside the South Tower as I watched this ambulance crew drive away, and there's a loud rumble in the roar, and I look up, and here comes the tower. And I said to myself, you idiot, you're the one who knew the tower was going to collapse, and you put yourself right underneath it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't think the towers were going to collapse as soon as they did. The South Tower was struck at 9:03, and 55 minutes later was already coming down in less than 1 hour. I thought the collapse was going to happen somewhere around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just a guesstimate. I thought we had 5 to 6 hours to get everybody out of the towers before they came down, but I was wrong. I was right about the towers collapsing, but wrong about the timing. As I was outside, the tower starts coming down, and I'm right underneath it. I start running as fast as I can, and the tower's coming down faster and faster. And as I'm running, I'm trying to make it to a footbridge that went in front of the World Trade Center complex. And I thought if I made it to the footbridge, I would have found and identified my body. And as I'm running, the building's coming down, we call a pancake type of collapse. One floor hitting the floor below, boom, 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 boom. And as I'm running, as each floor is hitting the floor below, it's puffing air out like a fireplace billows, like. And I could feel the air pressure on the back of my neck, but I just kept running. I kept looking at that footbridge. The air pressure got so strong, it took my helmet off my head. My helmet was flying through the air. My helmet was actually going up, almost making a U-turn like a boomerang. Then the air pressure was so strong, the estimated was like a tornado gust about 200 miles an hour. The air pressure lifted me off of my feet, and I was flying through the air. And here comes the building. The building's coming down, and people are in shock. They can't believe what they're seeing. And this huge dust cloud is chasing people all over Manhattan. And people start running over the Brooklyn Bridge, the same bridge that I drove to Manhattan. They're running back from Manhattan to Brooklyn. And at that point, they told the mayor and the governor he had to evacuate. Here comes the building. And then the building fell on top of the Marriott Hotel, which was in between the two towers. The South Tower splits the hotel in half, and it falls on me. A piece of steel opened up the whole back of my head, and huge slabs of concrete which just hit my body. And people all around the area were being hit with some of the debris and the glass. This is what people look like. And that huge toxic dust cloud covers lower Manhattan, and I'm buried alive. I didn't make it. I got a fractured skull, all my ribs are broken, my left arm snapped in half, my neck and spine is crushed, and I'm bleeding internally, and there's no more air, I'm suffocating. And I'm buried with all these people in the pitch darkness. There was no light, there was no air. And people were screaming in the darkness, and screams turned to cries. Cries turned into moans, moans turned into whimpers, and then total silence, no more voices, they were all dead, and I was still alive. Now I'm surrounded by all these fires, and I had a flashback to January 10th, 1981, when I was sworn into the New York City Fire Department. I remember taking the oath of office. I'd be willing to give my life so that somebody else might live. In the discharge of my duties, I'm becoming a new fireman in New York City with 124 other young guys. And all I kept on saying to myself, you never took that vow very seriously, and today you're living up to it. And my last thoughts, before I was taking my last breath of life, I said, why did I choose this career? This is not what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to be a construction superintendent working for a big construction company and erecting high-rise buildings. And then firefighters began searching a while later, and they found voids. They saw a hand, and they were digging. They found my friend Captain Al Fuentes, and then they found me. They scooped me up and put me on a long spine board, and they were running, and they put me on the deck of a boat. that was on the Hudson River that separates Manhattan from New Jersey, the famous Hudson River where Sully Sullenberg landed the jet about 8 years ago. The only way getting out of Manhattan that day on the west side where I was, you got on a boat that were coming from New Jersey to get people out of New York City, or you ran over the bridges on the east side, I just saw in the previous slides. And they put me on the deck of a boat, they were holding my head closed, and I heard them saying that I was gonna die if they couldn't get me to a hospital. And all of a sudden there was a loud rumble and a roar, and everybody on the building started screaming, "Oh my God, here comes the other tower." Now the north tower collapsed and flew across the street, and millions of shards of glass were raining down on the deck of the boat and pieces of the building. And everybody on the boat that were with me jumped overboard into the Hudson River and left me behind. I broke free from the spine board, I rolled over, I couldn't see, my whole face was swollen shut, the back of my head split open, my left arm snapped in half, my neck and spine is crushed, I'm losing a lot of blood. And I jumped into a doorway on the boat, and I ended up diving 10 feet below into the engine room. Now the North Tower buried the boat on the river. I'm buried and suffocating all over again. And after about an hour, as I was losing consciousness, I heard people banging, jumps, footsteps on the deck of the boat above, and voices. Somebody came into the engine room to stop the boat, and they found me. And the boat skipped across the river, where paramedics and EMTs were waiting on the New Jersey side. And they scooped me up out of the engine room on another spine board. Next thing I know, I'm in an ambulance, but I don't know where I am. I'm in New Jersey. And then I blacked out in the ambulance, and then somehow they revived me inside the operating room. They stripped all my clothes off of me, stark naked. They were sticking needles and tubes in every part of your body a needle and tube will go into. And as they were cutting my firefighting clothing off, they read the name on the inside of the jacket to Tommy McNamara. I was admitted as Tommy McNamara. For 3 days, I was declared dead and missing. Nobody knew where I was. I wasn't in New York, I was in New Jersey in a hospital. And that night, at 1 o'clock in the morning, they found my car in the back of the firehouse, and they called my house to say that I didn't make it. And then the next day, when the sun came up again, and the dust cloud disappeared, people realized that Superman isn't real, Batman and Robin isn't real, Spider-Man isn't real. The only children's rescue hero who ever came to life was Billy Blazes on the morning of September 11, 2001, when he would come to represent 343 firefighters who gave their lives in the greatest rescue effort ever witnessed by anyone. That was made in my likeness. I was number 344 on the missing list, and I was the last one found alive 3 days later. When I got out of the hospital, I started attending all the funerals for the firefighters and also the police officers. And then I was honored at the State address by Governor Pataki of New York State. I had got an opportunity to throw out the first pitch at the Yankee game on the 10th anniversary, 9/11. And then 3 years later, I was in recuperation once again. In 2004, I received a letter in the mail certified from the fire department. I opened it up and it says, "You are officially retired for disability." Something I didn't want, something I didn't expect, but there was a decision that the fire department made after 3 years. They said, "You're never coming back again." I broke down and I cried. My career was over. I wanted to do 25 more years, but the fire department made that decision that I wouldn't be able to come back again after all these injuries. With the medication I was on to control my brain injury, which was the worst. Since then, I've had multiple operations, and I just contracted a very serious disease I found out 2 weeks ago. I'm on heavy medication right now, so I could talk about it later personally with anybody. I don't want to bring it out into the audience right now. Well, then, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, people always ask me, "Joe, why did this happen? Why were we attacked?" Well, the truth of the matter is there's a group of Islamic extremists who misunderstand their own religion, don't understand what tolerance means. And for the boys and girls, and for everybody in the audience today, I want you to always accept tolerance, and I want you to be the hero beside you. Just like you can be a Billy Blazes too. I want you to be kind to others. And tolerance means appreciating and respecting differences in people, because we're all different. We all know that. But you know what? At the end of the day, we're all humans. I want you to keep that very close to your heart as you go through life. Because one simple act of kindness can change your life. as you go through life, ladies and gentlemen, even boys and girls, set your own sights. I want you to find your way in life. Don't give up until you find what you're looking for. Don't follow the crowd. I want you to be a leader. A lot of people know where they're running from, but forget where they're supposed to be running to. All through life, you should always be yourself, because an individual is always worth more than a copy. You know, so many people go through life wanting to be somebody else. They don't think that they're good enough, and I think we've all done that. There was a time we wished that we could be somebody else for whatever reason, but I let you know a little secret. All the time you or I or whoever spent wanting to be somebody else, what you never knew is that they wanted to be you. So be yourself, because an original is always worth more than a copy. That person in the mirror should be the only person you want to be. Just remember, a bird sitting on a branch of a tree is not afraid of the shaking branch, because the bird's thrust is not on the branch but in his wings. So believe in yourself. Standing alone doesn't mean I'm alone, it means I'm strong enough to do what's right. But all through life there'll be challenges. Life is full of them, don't fear them. Challenge yourself, start from scratch and just keep on scratching. There's no road that you can't walk if you believe in yourself. There'll be a bump here and there, there'll be bumpy roads, there'll also be roads that'll be interrupted in life, roads will be closed, there'll be hurdles to jump. Don't let the hurdles stop you. Jump the hurdles and overcome the obstacles. All detours will show us another way, and when you get confused as to which way you should go, just don't go in the wrong direction. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, there's a line in the sand that you don't cross. I've crossed the line in the sand a couple times in my life, but you know what? You gotta use your head all the time. There's that line in the sand that you gotta be really careful when you step on the other side. You don't know what's waiting for you. Once you go through life facing your challenges and your challengers, there's no shortcuts to success, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. The whole idea in life is to stay on course of the direction you want to go, but there may be times when you feel like you're sinking. That's the time you need to be brave. Fight your fears and anxieties, find the strength you thought you never had. If you fall and fail, get back up. And just remember, the man of the hour, he spent many days and nights getting there. I want you to challenge your brain. You'll go as far as your mind can take you. A wise man makes the most of what he has. A fool does nothing with what he has. You're your own doctor when it comes to a cold feet, a hot head, and stuffy attitude. And just remember, Barack Obama, when he was a baby, and every other successful person had no idea what life had in store for them. But there's one thing that they have and you have, is desire and commitment. That's all it takes in life. No successful or wealthy person or famous person ever knew it when they were a baby. So that should be enough of incentive for every single one in this room to realize you can be as successful and attain whatever you want if you believe in yourself. And of course, there's always the expectations in life. Sometimes people keep their expectations way too high, and disappointments will be plenty. You got to learn in life to separate fantasy from reality, because life is full of phony illusions. If you want a life of fantasy, go hang out with Mickey and Minnie in Disney World. And the cost of greed. Boys and girls and ladies and gentlemen, don't take what doesn't belong to you. There's so many people. Matter of fact, there's articles in today's newspaper back home about another congressman taking money and absconding funds. And I can go on and on and on and on. Maybe plenty of you know people in newspaper stories in Hollywood, people that aren't famous. They're trying to get something that they haven't earned, that they haven't deserved, they haven't worked for. It's called the cost of greed. And in the end, you'll end up a loser. Here's what I found out. With everybody who ever took something, stole money or funds or whatever had, in the end, they end up losing way more than anything they ever stood to gain in the beginning. Don't ever go down that road, okay? Don't take what doesn't belong to you. Life can sometimes be a struggle. At times it seems our problems are too much to bear. That's when you got to be strong. Don't handcuff yourself with doubt. Success is never letting go, and sometimes it's only an inch between failure and success. Let your education be your leader. If you find an excuse, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, don't pick it up. Okay, he has an excuse, but he doesn't use it. I want you to learn and grow from your mistakes. Stand tall and face your mistakes. You own it. But solutions and problems, they go hand in hand. I want you to learn to manage your mistakes sensibly. There's lessons in both. I can tell you right now, some of the best lessons I learned in life were not the things I did good and right, but the bad and the wrong things. Those are the ones you never want to ever make again. And that's why pencils still come with an eraser. I blew it, what do I do? Learn and grow from your mistakes. That's the most important thing. When you turn 6 years old, mommy and daddy put the game, pin the tail on the donkey away forever. You don't get to pin your misdeeds on your neighbors, your teachers, your friends, your siblings. Those days are over. If you're looking for trouble, don't go. I want you to stop. Put your foot on the brake. I want you to stop and think about your parents. And you know, no matter what happens in life, sometimes people make a left turn and never come back again. And I do a lot of counseling to people. It's called the road back. That road is always open. Don't fear the path. If at times in life you find yourself getting away, too far to the left, there's always an opportunity to come back again. When you're feeling turned upside down, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, like a diver, there are days when you feel like you're sinking and you feel hopelessness. Don't surrender. Don't let yourself get to this point. If you feel like you're stuck in a maze, just reach out for help. And I'm going to tell you something, boys and girls and ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to share a very personal story. It took me a long time to share the story because I never wanted to talk about it. When I was in high school, I suffered very severe depression. For reasons I don't know why. I never turned to alcohol, I never turned to drugs. I didn't do anything bad, I didn't do anything wrong. I fell into a depression. Depression sometimes becomes a normal way of life for some of us. If you're going through it, I'm just going to tell you right now, don't give up. Because whatever you're thinking in life, whatever affecting your well-being, whatever making you sad, just remember this. Whatever you're going through, you don't even know somebody else is going through it with you at the same time. Somebody else has already been through it, somebody else will go through it in the future. If there's anything that's compromising your well-being, and I speak mostly to the young students because I was there at that point. I suffered depression for 15 straight years, never got medicated, never asked for help, never reached out. I suffered in silence. Don't do it. I lost too many good years of my life suffering in silence. I didn't know why I was going through this, but I learned a lot about myself. But you know what? I could have saved some years of my life if I would have just gotten the help that I needed. Don't be afraid to reach out. And I'm talking to the adults as well. If there's something that's compromising your well-being, you got to realize that it ain't weird, it's not strange, it's not different. It's okay to talk about it. I can talk about it now, but I wouldn't all those years ago, and I really regret that. So just reach out for help, and you're going to find your way. I want you always to hang in there and never let go. There'll always be opportunities to get it back together. When you find yourself at the bottom of a hole, and I've found myself at the bottom of a hole many times in my life, whether you put yourself in that hole or whether life puts you in that hole, does anybody know what you should do? Stop digging. It's as simple as that. Just start believing in yourself. Just reach out for your faith. Faith costs you nothing, and hope is nothing. It's free. Always have faith and hope in whatever's going on in your life. It's our faith that helps us learn the skills to get past the barriers. And tomorrow the sun will shine again. And when you want to come back to a more productive life, if you made mistakes, you don't have to put a picket fence around your life. You don't have to walk around with a book of rules. It's not about that. Just don't give up. Because you know what? On September 11, 2001, we didn't give up. We paid the ultimate sacrifice, but I'm here to tell the story. And as I close out this presentation, I want to read a little poem. And take from this poem whatever you care to it. This is something that's very important to me because there's a lot of issues going on in this country. There seems to be a lot of division, a lot of animosity and hatred. And I spend a lot of time trying to bring people together. And the title of this poem is called The Cold Within. 6 humans trapped by happenstance in bleak and bitter cold. Each one possessed a stick of wood, and so the story's told. Their dying fire in need of logs, the first man held his back. While on the faces around the fire, he noticed that one was black. The next man looking across the way did not see anyone from his church and couldn't bring himself to give the dying fire his stick of birch. The third one sat in tattered clothes and gave her coat a hitch. Why should her log be put to use to warm the greedy rich? The rich man just sat back and thought of the wealth he had in store and how to keep what he had earned from the lazy poor. The black man's face spoke of revenge as the fire passed from his sight. All he saw in his stick of birch was his chance to spike the white. The last man of this freezing group did nothing except for gain. Giving only to those who gave is how he played the game. Their logs held tight in their dying hands was proof of human sin. They didn't die from the cold outside, they died from the cold within. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm going to take time now to open up the floor to questions. If anybody wants to ask me something, I'm going to stay here and answer some of your questions if I have the answer. If you want to share a story, just want to know something more about me, now's the time. And if not, the session will be over in a couple of minutes. But feel free to ask the questions that you might be interested in. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Anybody want to ask me anything? Anybody have any questions for me?
I do. My kids had the whole Rescue Rangers, or Rescue Heroes, and Billy Blazes was their favorite.
Well, he was made in my likeness, so you got to meet him
That's
today. And thank you for sharing that story. Anybody else have anything they wanted to ask me?
Did you lose any of your friends from Ladder 10?
I'm sorry?
Did you lose any of your friends from Ladder 10?
Yes, 6 members of my firehouse didn't make it. 343 firefighters altogether, 343 fire department members. 250 were firefighters, 47 were lieutenants, 20 were captains, 17 were battalion chiefs, 1 was a deputy chief, 2 were assistant chiefs, 1 was the chief of department, 1 was the first deputy fire commissioner, 1 was the department chaplain, 2 of them were fire marshals, and 1 was a paramedic. 343 fire department members in total. Yes?
How many days did you say it was between when they figured out who you actually were when you were rescued?
They found me that day, but I ended up in a hospital. They put me on a boat, and I ended up across the river. And for 3 days, nobody knew where I was. And 3 days after September 11th, they were searching surrounding states, because there were rumors there might be people in surrounding states. They were searching all the hospitals, and just happened to find me because they were going from hospital to hospital to hospital. I was misidentified, so it was a tough process finding me. But 3 days later, I was taken off of the death list. I was the 344th firefighter, and the last one that was found alive.
So the McNamara, the guy that you had?
He was at home with his wife having a cup of tea. Anybody else have anything you want to ask? Well, anyway, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this opportunity. And never give up on yourself. I didn't. Life isn't always what we want it to be. Life isn't always what we thought it would be. Life isn't always what we need it to be for every single one of us. We never know what life has in store for us. There's going to be days where we're not happy. There's going to be days where we're sad. There's going to be days we're not feeling well. But you know why? You got to hang in there. I went through this so many times in my life. Don't give up on life. You got to believe in yourself. And again, if anything's compromising your general well-being, don't sit back in silence and suffer like I did. Reach out and get the help you need. There's always help out there. I didn't think there was help. I was a fool. There's always help out there. There's people who care about you. So don't give up on yourself. It's a wrong decision, okay? Don't make a long-term decision to solve a short-term problem. That's all I'm going to tell you, and I'm very sincere about that. I go through life trying to save every single person I can from whatever hardship. It's kind of like my mission in life right now, because I went through it. I know what it's like. And you can't talk about something if you yourself haven't been through it. It's a lot to say that I understand, but until you go through it, you fully will never truly understand it. And it's sharing your personal story that I like to give people hope and strength. If they can get that from me, I'm so adamant about doing this in my retirement. Anybody else have a question? Anybody want to know? Somebody probably wants to know if I'm Tony Soprano's cousin. I get that all the time. Do I have an accent? Forget about it. People ask me that all the time when I'm traveling across the country. Joe, what does that mean anyway? How can you always say forget about it? Well, it could mean a lot of things. It could mean something very good or something really bad, depending how and when you use it. Then somebody asked me, how come all you Italian guys are named Tony? Well, that's true, right? I said, because Tony spelled backwards spells why not? I always have to have a couple of jokes. Yes, ma'am?
Did they ever launch your Billy Blazes that day, or did
That's a good question. Did they ever launch Billy Blazes? As a matter of fact, when the Fisher Price executives were told that I was declared dead, they didn't even want to launch him. They wanted to forget about it. But anyway, when they found out 3 days later, they were exhilarated, they were happy, they were almost crying, they didn't want to come and see me. And yes, they did launch him, and they ended up raising about $300,000 for my education program. Because all that money wasn't, I was getting $1 if everyone sold around the world, and that was going to support my education program. And as I travel around the country, I do a lot of corporate speaking, and usually I'm the keynote around noontime and late in the evening. I'm invited to their banquets and their dinners and their fundraisers and their auctions. And they'll always auction off one of the Billy Blazes at their evening banquet, and people bid $10,000 on Billy Blazes if I'll sign and take a picture with them. Then back on February of 2019, 4.5 years ago, I was at home in New Jersey where I now live after I retired, and I was having a cup of coffee about 11 o'clock in the morning, and the phone rings. It's the Fisher Price Corporation again. Hey, Joe, this is the Fisher Price Corporation. We've been thinking a lot about you. How's life? What are you doing? And I told them, I said, you know, I help people with their home improvement projects. I'm a tour guide at Ground Zero. I travel the country doing keynote speaking. I volunteer a lot of my time. I go to Walter Reed Medical Center and visit the soldiers when they come back from Iraq and Afghanistan. Oh, that's great to hear. We've been thinking a lot about you. Because we're going to resurrect our rescue hero line. And our new rescue hero is going to be you, Joe Torrillo. I'm the only person in the world who's ever had a rescue hero made in his likeness. G.I. Joe is everybody who ever served in the military, but Fisher Price and the new rescue hero is actually Joe Torrillo. Some woman looked at the rescue hero and looked at me. She says, you know, you're a little better looking in person. I said, lady, I've been accused of a lot of things, but good looking was never one of them, so I'm going to worry about it. And anyway, thank you for this opportunity. If anybody else have a question, you want to share a story with me? So I thought you come up here to like sing to me.
I have class.
I just happened to like me that much.
Thank you.
No, thank you for coming. Anybody else have a question? Lady in the back?
It's not a question, but it's interesting when you say forget about it. I have a granddaughter that says that quite often, and her first name is Brooklyn.
Is that right? What a
Yes.
coincidence. Well,
Yes.
I told her I love her.
Okay, I'll tell her that.
Anybody else have anything you want to share with me? Ask a question, anything? I'm not uptight. Whatever you think you want to ask me, it's okay. Yes.
How long was your recovery?
My recovery, well, it's a good answer. It's hard for me to answer. I'm not fully recovered, and I never will. But it took me about 4 years before my brain had to kind of get reprogrammed from the brain injury. And it took me about 4 years with a lot of medication. I'm still on that medication right now. And I had a bunch of surgeries, and I just was diagnosed with a very serious illness 2 weeks ago. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know. Life is going to be different for me right now, I can tell you that much. But I still find the strength every day to get out here and get up in front of people and speak and share my story. And I'm a tour guide at Ground Zero. I represent the victims and the families. When people come to New York City, I take them on a private tour of Ground Zero. I volunteer my time. Same thing I'm doing, you know, as I speak to you, I get to share that story back home in New York. Yes, sir?
You may not want to answer this. Do you ever wake up from a nightmare of that day?
I do, as a matter of fact. You know, I have nightmares. I have all these, matter of fact, I had one last night, as a matter of fact. I have this ongoing nightmare that I'm in a firehouse and I can't find my firefighting clothing and the alarm comes in. But I also have these nightmares about being inside the top of the World Trade Center with my wife and kids, and they're just admiring the view from the top of the building, and I'm telling them that we have to get out of here right away, and they want to know why. I said, you don't understand, these buildings are going to collapse. And they don't understand why I'm saying that, because they didn't understand about September 11th, right? This is an image before September 11th. So that memory is always in my head, and I get these flashbacks and these nightmares about being in the towers. And it doesn't really, I can't say it affects me, I don't wanna lie to you, but I do have those dreams, those recollections. I wouldn't say all the time, but they come back from time to time, because people ask me all the time, you know, what's it like now? I said, well, to tell you the truth, when I think about that incident, which almost every single day, it feels like it never happened. There were days that feel like it was 100 years ago, and sometimes it feels like it was just yesterday. I have all these crazy recollections about that incident, and of course, I will never ever forget it. How could you? Anybody else? I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. If I never see you again, don't ever give up on yourself. You know, life is worth living. And in closing, let me say, may God bless all of you always, in all ways. And thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate it. Oh, by the way, guess who I have here?